Evelyn was a women's auxiliary.
She flew Luscombe. Like, how cool. Kind of an early aviation influencer. People would mail her like letters, gets to learn how to fly. 14, 15, like her falling behind on rent, and put a story in there and teach them something new. So
you're listening to the Wonder Women of Aviation, a podcast that helps preserve the history of women in aviation and highlights women involved in aviation. Each episode, we meet with women, both in and out of the cockpit, to talk about their passions, experiences, the history of aviation, and how they make an impact. So strap in and hang on tight as we soar through the skies with these Wonder Women of Aviation.
Welcome to the Wonder Women of Aviation podcast, sponsored by Extreme Flight and Hilo Social Media. I'm here with Mehrdad.
hi.
Hi. And we actually met yesterday with my mutual friend Erin, which I absolutely love Erin. She's a phenomenal woman. But she briefly told me about, well, we're going to learn more about Mehrdad, and Aviana is the...
Aviana, sure, yeah.
Okay, so let's start there. Like, who is Mehrdad and what is Aviana?
Oh, Aviana is honestly not that interesting, but it's an aircraft detailing company.
Okay.
So we go around and we make old airplanes shiny, we make new airplanes shinier, we fix paint problems, do paint protection.
Okay.
Pretty much what there is to it. So yeah, that's Aviana in a nutshell.
Okay, I mean, it is pretty interesting. You make things look brand new and shiny.
Yeah. Case in point.
But the reason why we're here and the reason why we're on the Wonder Woman of Aviation is this beautiful aircraft here, which I want to tell my viewers more about. There's a whole story behind this.
Yeah.
And I'd like to learn more about, first of all, who is Evelyn?
Sure. So yeah, that's definitely the more interesting story here. So when I bought this plane about 2 years ago, to try and get buy-in from my wife, I was like, why don't you name the plane? You know, it's a 1940s plane. What's a good period appropriate name? So she came up with the name Evelyn. I was like, okay, yeah, I like that. So I started Googling Evelyn to see if there's any aviation connection, and I came across Evelyn Sharp's Wikipedia page. I was like, oh, wow, there's a aviatrix named Evelyn. I'd never heard of her before. So started doing research, and turns out not a lot of people had heard about her. And I live in Iowa. She's from Nebraska. It's like, how cool to use this plane. That gets a lot of attention. You know, it's shiny. You pull it into an air show, people think it's really expensive, which it's not. So like, people are looking at it, let's put a story in there and teach them something new. So I had an artist that specializes in 1940s nose art commission that art piece on the nose, and then I traced her signature, so that's Evelyn's actual signature, and wrote a little story, which is on the poster up there. So wherever the plane goes, the poster's up, and you know, it starts a lot of conversations like this about, oh, who was Evelyn? Well, let me tell you.
Right. And I think that's phenomenal, the fact that, you know, you're keeping that little part of history alive.
Yeah.
So Evelyn was a women's auxiliary
Ferrying Squadron.
I always get that. I get it confused between WASP and WAFS.
and I might be wrong on that too, because what is WASP? Women's Aviation Service Pilots? Yeah, so I think WAFS is Auxiliary Flying Service. Evelyn was born in Montana, and then she was adopted shortly after by a couple. When Evelyn was 14, 15, like her parents, they had all sorts of little small businesses, right? Never really very successful, but they had this bed and breakfast above their store, and really more just like a room and board deal. And they had a tenant who was a flight instructor named Jack Jeffords. And Jack Jeffords wasn't making a whole lot of money in Ord, Nebraska in the 1930s. So he was falling behind on rent. And John Sharp's like, well, you know, if you want, teach Evelyn how to fly and we'll call it good, right? Mm-hmm. So young Evelyn gets to learn how to fly, gets to solo. She becomes the youngest female commercial pilot in the country at the time. So she wasn't the youngest female private pilot, but by the time she became a commercial pilot, she was the youngest. And she was actually quite a celebrity. She was very well known. People would mail her like letters and stuff. She was in newspapers, kind of an early aviation influencer. And she really wanted to get a higher rating. She just needed more hours. To get more hours, she needed planes. It was really hard to get planes. The town of Ord, again, this is Nebraska, 1930s, kind of Dust Bowl era. Like, it's not a booming place. And the business leaders in Ord, they kind of pulled some money together, gave her a down payment to buy a Cub. So she bought a Taylor Cub, they named it the Ord, and now she would go around promoting the city of Ord as a barnstormer. So she'd give hundreds of rides a day and promote the city and do airport openings and attend events. So she built a ton of time doing that, but ultimately that wasn't paying the bills either. And more or less she was taking care of her parents by this point too. So she got a job as a civilian pilot training program instructor, so CPTP, and she ended up teaching students in a Luscombe much like this.
Okay.
So that was actually a rag wing version with 55 horsepower. This is an 85 horsepower metal wing. And I didn't know that when I bought the plane.
Really?
I was reading the book on Evelyn Sharp and I was like, she flew Luscombes. Like, how cool is that?
So cool.
So she did that, and then when the WAFS program was announced, they were extremely selective with their pilots because it was kind of set up to fail because people didn't believe women could fly.
Yeah.
So Nancy Love was the one in charge of organizing the WAFs, and she just wanted the most elite pilots in the country. So Evelyn joined the WAFs with about 3,000 flying hours. She had already instructed hundreds of men how to fly. Like, she was by all means extremely qualified for the position.
Right.
So she passed, I don't remember exactly which number of WAFs she was, but she was basically like the founding gang of WAFs. She ended up shuttling aircraft as they do. They did a lot of transport. Later on, the WASPs came along and they did a lot of other support roles as well. But by that point, Nancy's squad of the WAFs, they were so highly trained in moving pursuit aircraft, which is kind of what the big need was. So you have companies on the West Coast creating these fighter planes that need to go to New Jersey to be shipped off. So Evelyn was flying P-51 Mustangs and C-47s, and because that's all Lockheed in Santa Monica, right? So she's flying Mustangs out of there, and she was signed off on just about everything but the B-29. So she checked out in P-38 after a couple hours, and on her first cross-country flight across the country, she kind of made note of some engine troubles, but these are all, you gotta keep in mind, these are factory new airplanes built during wartime, so they're not perfect. So as she's taken off out of New Cumberland, Pennsylvania, or Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, she lost her engine on takeoff, and that airport's kind of surrounded by an icy river and hills. So she kind of coaxed the plane over the hills and just plopped it down in an open field. And based on the pictures, it's not like she like spinned it in. Mm-hmm. It was just kind of a pancake down type of deal, not a lot of forward motion. But the nose gear in a P-38 sits right underneath the pilot, and it just ejected her out of the canopy and killed her instantly. So just one of those weird things that it probably would have been a survivable crash had it not been for that nose gear shooting her through.
Wow.
So Evelyn was killed at 24. Highly trained pilot, very well respected. Everyone liked working with her. Mm-hmm. She was very popular. And I mean, she was also only child, and she had adopted parents. So her story wasn't really told that well. The war's still going on. She, like, her sisters kind of pooled money together to send home with the family because she didn't get war benefits. She was not a veteran.
Right.
They didn't give her shit.
Right.
So her friends collected money to send back to her folks so she could be buried. Which is really sad.
Yeah, that is.
It's very sad. But over the years, you know, they would celebrate her, and they had Evelyn Sharp Days, and it was at one of these events, or it was some sort of fly-in, that a lady named Diane Bartles flew into Ord. She's looking at this little display about Evelyn Sharp, and there's an old man there that kind of starts talking to her about Evelyn. And Diane is, at the time she was an English teacher, but she was also a pilot, member of the 99s, and the gentleman was Dr. Glenn Auble, who was one of those business leaders in the 30s that was pooling money together and trying to see Evelyn off to be successful. So they get talking, and basically Diane gets a grant, spends 10 years researching Evelyn's story, and writes this book called Sharpie, the story of Evelyn Sharp, which is basically the primary reference that we work off of for Evelyn Sharp. But if it wasn't for that chance encounter in that FBL, this story, like, it very easily could have died off.
Yeah, it wouldn't have gotten out there, because that's, I mean, I've been delving into the WASP, not so much the WAFS, but, like, I've never heard of her. Right, yeah. So, I mean, the fact that the story is out there, and that's why I like, you know, meeting individuals such as yourself that keep that piece of history alive. How long did it take to research?
For me?
Yeah.
I read the book and I've called and talked to Diane for many hours, and I made a trip to Ord, Nebraska in this plane and visited Evelyn's gravesite and kind of the historical society there, and they have a lot of the primary documents and logbooks and stuff there. But basically, I just run stuff by Diane because she's the expert.
Okay. I'll have to reach out to her.
Yeah, she's a night owl, so she'll call me at like 10 o'clock at night, and we end up talking till midnight, just about whatever she's learned, or sometimes she finds new bits of interest, or she's just constantly learning about the field and talking about Evelyn, so it's really cool.
That is super cool. And
yeah.
In fact, I mean, she was 17, I think, when she got her license, right? Or
yeah.
18 with her
commercial license, yeah.
Which is pretty cool. And then 24, so that is, that's a young life.
She got a lot done.
But she did. She accomplished a lot, and that's what these stories that I like to share. Can you tell us a little bit, before I let you go, about this aircraft?
So this is a 1946 Luscombe 8A. It was converted to an 8E model, which means it has a bigger engine. It has wing tanks instead of a center fuselage tank. As you can see, it's kind of a polished aluminum scheme. It's a lot of fun to fly. Luscombe's kind of get a reputation for being hard to fly.
Okay.
But they're just very responsive, and if it's doing something you don't want it to do, it's generally because you told it to. So early on, I bought this plane with 0 tailwheel time. So it took a little bit to get good at it, but it's just so incredibly satisfying to fly because it rewards good flying. So
I've never heard that.
Yeah, it does. Like you can land a lot of planes right? And it's fine. You land a tail dragger. Do you have your tail dragger?
I'm gonna learn to fly eventually when my husband gets his CFI.
All right, well, let's work on that. So the tail draggers, if you land in any kind of crab or sideways attitude, you're going to be really busy with your feet, right? So tail dragger pilots always like to say, happy feet on takeoff, landing. You can avoid a lot of that by just being aligned and straight. So you can reach proficiency in a tail dragger, but like mastery is very elusive, and that takes just a lot longer to get to that point. So I can spend an hour in the pattern and just try and perfect and shave off little issues here and there, and that's therapy for me. So that's what I love about this plane, and it's cheap to operate. So if you just want to go flying, you don't need to have a reason to go flying. You can just get in and go.
Now, I mean, she is a beautiful airplane. Like, does that take a lot of polish?
Yeah, so that's what I do for a living. So
there you go. There's Ryan.
I have the process pretty well down. I have YouTube videos on how to do this on the channel, but yeah, the initial polishing is a lot of work, and it's usually in a hangar getting babied. It's about as dirty as I've ever seen it here now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but
it looks beautiful to me.
I probably spent at this point about 20 to 30 hours a year on it. Keep it polished.
So what is your goal with Evelyn? Like, do you go from show to show, or what is your objective?
I wish I could do that. I have a family. I'm starting law school. I run a business. Like, there's a lot on my plate. I try and take to air shows that I can get to easily. It's not a fast airplane. It's not a very weather-capable airplane. But yeah, basically what you see here is my setup, and it's great seeing kids come up to it. They start reading, and what's really important to me, I have a daughter, is that they see this girl on there, and it's not just some long-legged blonde, right? Like, this is the pilot that flew this plane, and they read the story, and like, this was a really accomplished female pilot. And I mean, my daughter's probably sick of the story, but to her, girls are pilots and it's fine. Like, it's no big deal. The social circles that I go through, and there's some very high performance female pilots, and to her that's normal, which is awesome, right? Because it hasn't always been that way. So that's kind of my goal with it, is tell Evelyn's story and make sure that people know that Evelyn was adopted. She had asthma. She grew up in 1930s Nebraska. Like, that's not a privileged upbringing, and she got that far just through love of aviation and hard work. So
gosh, I love it. And the fact that you mentioned that she was your non-traditional female pilot, not that average. And there's a lot of pilots out there, but that's someone that probably people could identify with now.
More easily than just having a really rich husband, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So for those that want to learn more about Evelyn, learn more about you, where can they find you?
So on YouTube, we have a video that's kind of a short documentary about Evelyn Sharp. You can find that on Aviation Aircraft. Since there's not a lot of information about Evelyn Sharp, if you start Googling Evelyn Sharp, my stuff will probably come up. On Instagram, Aviation Aircraft. Not super active on Facebook, but yeah, I'd say YouTube and Instagram. If you go to aviano.net/Evelyn, it's kind of my collection of Evelyn facts and videos, so that would be a good starting point. And if you get a hold of Diane's book, it's called Sharpie by Diane Bartles. Maybe we can link to it. It's kind of hard to find on Amazon, but I have copies if you need one, or I can put you in touch with Diane, who just sells them direct. She's newer to the whole online selling thing.
Okay, so. Awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely going to check it out. And the fact that I learned more about Evelyn Sharp, that kind of just made my trip.
Yeah,
because that was like
great.
Someone that I did not know. So
yeah.
Thank you for being on the podcast, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for watching.
To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram at Natalie7170. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.